I struggle with this. Like, I have this rant that I trot out regularly about how we as a culture seem to want to write all these dystopian science fiction stories. And I'm a massive fan of utopian science fiction. Like, I love
Mm,
Star Trek and, like,
yeah,
and they're so hard to find, actually, utopian sci-fi for some reason. Like, we seem to be obsessed with the dark and dystopian.
yeah,
So if people know of any great utopian science fiction, I mean, I've read some, like I love The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin, and
yeah,
I recently read The Fifth Sacred Thing by Starhawk. But these are stories of little bubbles of utopian futures, confronting huge dystopias all around them and fighting for their lives. That's not quite the story that
yeah,
I'm looking for.
yeah.
And I struggle, like, so I think, oh, maybe I should write those utopian sci-fi stories if I'm going to sit here complaining about it. But I find it really challenging. Like, I have this framework about leadership that I use sometimes called full circle leadership, which talks about visionary leadership and operational leadership. And I am, like, very far over on spectrum towards the operational leadership thing. I'm, like, very much what can we build next week as a proximal step from where we are now. And I push myself and I try to get to that future visionary, you know, utopian cast further out thing, but I find it really challenging. But I guess I can feel like it's just right there, like the possible beyond paradigm thing. Maybe it's not so far away, and that makes it feel more accessible to me.
Yeah, well, I'm not far from it for me to tell you what your vision should be, but like my sense of you is that you have a really firm vision of that, even though I've heard you talk about yourself being more operational, and I'm not going to argue with that, of course, but it's clear that you have a really strong sense of what's needed here and now, and I really appreciate that, and you've been a part of a group of people that are really, you know, prefiguring, something legit, and obviously been a hugely inspiring thing given Inspiral's popularity.
I guess it would just be like a slightly more like pushed forward version of what I'm doing in my life. Like, I bought my first house a couple years ago because we were having a baby, and, like, of course I had all these internal struggles of, like, oh no, am I, like, becoming this terrible, like, suburban homeowner? Am I losing my values or whatever? And it was a really weird process going
Yeah,
through, like, trying to get the bank to approve you to give you a mortgage. And we had a strange experience because we submitted all of our information to the bank, and it was then that I realized, like, for the past whatever 8 years, my life has been so defined by wealth of my network, wealth in relationships, and wealth in collaboration. And so much of the wealth of my life was not represented in numbers and
yeah,
money in the bank. And they were like, hang on, so you've been, like, making only this much money, and yet you're, like, saved up money and you have it. It's because so much of the richness of my life was not, I didn't have to pay for. It wasn't in the capitalist paradigm.
yeah.
So, like, whatever, we convinced them to give us a house or give us a mortgage, and we got a house and stuff. But I just think, I guess, pushing that to even further extreme, like, I would love to, instead of living in my own house, I'd love to live in a, housing cooperative situation. It was too much for me to take that on in addition to everything else I was doing. But if that were the norm, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
My partner and I, we do completely, like, 50-50 balanced parenting and working. We both work part-time, do parenting, and obviously we're incredibly privileged to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But it's also a choice in terms of gender balance and, all of that stuff, and, constantly questioning these roles that society sometimes tells us we need to play. But imagine, what if that was the norm? What if, like, balancing work life and family life, and, between genders or between people or however that they wanted to balance it for their own lives, what if that was the norm? And so I guess it's more about just taking everything that I'm doing. I set this bar really high in my own life, where I'm only going to do work on, positive impact projects. Again, speaks to my huge privilege to be able to say that, but I have managed it for the last 8 years. All of my work has been open source, in the building the commons, positive impact, whatever.
Mhm.
Mistakes have been made. Not everything went perfectly, but I was trying, at least, genuinely. So I guess if everybody had those same opportunities across society, imagine what a different world it would look like.